For Commander players who started more than 5 or even 10 years ago, do you remember feeling that lands used to be easy? Like, we'd stare at non-land cards for hours trying to figure out what to add and what to cut, but lands just play whatever fixing within your budget. Make sure to save room for basics and toss in the stable utility lands. You know, Reliquary Tower, Strip Mine. I had a friend who insisted in throwing High Market into every deck. I didn't agree, but whatever. Those were like free slots anyways. But from 2019 onwards, things got crazy fast. Starting with Throne of Eldraine, which brought us the castles, and those blew our minds. Little did we know that was just the beginning. I mean, back then we hadn't seen anything like that since Kamigawa almost. They produced color, often enter untapped, and the abilities were widely useful. They weren't strictly better than basics, but the risk of making the swap is fairly negligible. I was excited for the power-up, but had a nagging discomfort at the back of my mind. I was kind of hoping this wouldn't be the norm, or soon enough I'll have to use my brain and think about lands? Well, fast forward to 2025, now lands can transform, tell stories, go mad, work really hard, and even go on adventures apparently. Yeah, these Final Fantasy towns and this leak is where I finally lost it. So you play a forest and I casually drop a planet? Yeah, seems good. And what is this? It can be stationed into a Gaia's Cradle. What the crap? I need this. But with the fierce competition, I felt a total revamp of my land bases was necessary. And after going through a dozen or so decks, I had materialized a relatively intuitive and effective methodology for myself that is somewhat elegant and easy to follow. We'll make a tier list for lands and suggest a step-by-step process to work our way up the list, picking the best utility lands while not messing up our mana producing priority. But before we get into it, this is Next Level Commander. I'm Jin. If you like this content, please like and subscribe. Let me know what you think. I try to reply to every comment. So which lands should we pick for our Commander decks? Like spells, we just choose the most synergistic ones, right? Wrong. Because again, these are lands, not spells. We have to go with the ones that are closest to, well, basic lands. Yeah, because fundamentally, that's what we're replacing. Actually, I've seen people count the MDFCs as spells, or half spell, half lands, when deck building. I can see the reasoning, but this actually adds another massive layer of complexity to evaluating these cards. Counting them as lands is where these cards are at their best, due to the near negligible opportunity cost. Still not clear? It will be once we go through the tier list, I promise. Now, this isn't a tier list for power, that's important. It is for how easy these lands are to include into a deck. And our first tier is, of course, just like the basics, ones that enter untapped and produce color. And the Neon Dynasty Kamigawa channel lands are the best of the best. I don't think this is a particularly controversial statement. Also, the ones from original Kamigawa are great too. Lands like Urborg and Yavimaya also belong here. In the same tier, following closely, are this set of MDFCs that enter untapped for 3 life. And for some reason, this one odd Blackgate from Lord of the Rings. The 3 life may not seem negligible, but trust me, it is. Because you won't be needing it to enter untapped every game you draw it. For an educated guess, I'd say you will need that mana immediately in roughly a third to half of the games, which means the actual life cost is somewhere between 1 to 1.5 life per game. That really isn't much. What makes this tier so special is that you can play pretty much as many of them as you want. In 90% of the games, they will be no different than basics. Now following that are these ones that enter untapped, but dependent on some minor conditions. For me, these fall somewhere between tier 1 and 2. 1.5, I guess. And whether to treat them like tier 1 or tier 2 depends on your deck. If you have the tools to turn them on easily, just toss them in. For example, in a 3-color deck with fetches, shocks, and other lands with basic land types, we can expect lands like Dalkovan Encampment and Mistrise Village to almost always be untapped, bringing them closer to tier 1. Now, moving on to the second tier, we have 2 kinds of lands. I guess 2A and 2B. 2A are the ones that enter tapped but produce color, and 2B are the ones that enter untapped but produce colorless. If you have a solid argument to convince me why one is better than the other, I'd love to listen. For now, we'll just have to settle for them being kind of equal, with 2A being better the more colors your decks have, and vice versa. This is the most difficult tier to work with because of the drawbacks can definitely be felt in games, and there's a ton of competition. For a land this tier to be considered, it needs to provide a lot of synergy, or raw power. For this group, something like a Path of Ancestry is a standout example because of the color fixing, and the scry can be immensely helpful in most typo decks. Another example is Mosswork Bridge, which is ridiculously powerful in any creature-based build. In terms of general utility, one of my favorites is Valakut Awakening. This allows us to cycle everything useless from our hand depending on which stage of the game we're in. And lastly, a personal pet card, Entangled Florahedron. One of the most awkward moments with any Rem spell is when you cast it, but you miss a land drop. With our Florahedron here, that will never happen, either as a trusty land or a little boost. That is excellent flexibility in the early game. Also worth mentioning, the Cycling 1 options from Lord of the Rings are functionally tapped lands, tapped dual lands if you have them in the deck. This makes them really similar to the tapped 2-color MDFCs for Modern Horizons. The color fixing is such a massive plus that they had to keep the front side unimpressive. Now let's talk about the colorless group, but untapped. From the old staples, Reliquary Tower I think is fairly overrated. I think it was Snail who made an excellent video covering this. But Strip Mine on the other hand is only becoming more and more relevant nowadays, with all the crazy lands they've been printing. Urza Saga is of course ridiculous if you have some of the power trinkets like Skull Clamp and Top, alongside Soul Ring. And Corehaven is still holding strong till this day in any reactive control decks. Scavenger's Ground is always great, and the new Abstergo Entertainment has been an all-star whenever I drew it. But let's not just talk about the staples. With all the options we have now, we can afford to ditch those for lands that are specifically synergistic with our decks. For example, Witch's Clinic is straight up color pipe break, in my opinion, that can single-handedly solve the life gain problem if your commander can smack or burn opponents. I play Treasure Map in my mono red deck because it's a burn deck and it wants to store mana for one massive turn. And Treasure Vault can boost our usable mana by 30 to 40% for one turn in the late game. Access Tunnel is very cute in some Voltron decks because you can get your commander into the tunnel first and then pump, equip, enchant, or whatever after. And this is our tier 2 lands. And from my personal experience, I wouldn't play more than 8 lands from this group. And again, how many from each side depends on the colors. If we are monocolored, I'd feel a lot more comfortable playing the colorless options. But in 5-color, even 1 or 2, you will feel the hurt when you draw them. And of course, it may depend on your deck and commander as well. For example, if your commander is the Wandering Minstrel, well, you're definitely in the wrong video. But yeah, no more than 8. This is the sweet spot I found. And now we're moving on to tier 3, lands that enter tapped and make colorless mana. Now this is feeling less and less like a land, but there's a reason for these drawbacks. They're powerful. I mean, Field of the Dead requires no mention, but Hall of the Bandit Lord and Boseiju, I still find myself playing them in plenty of decks. Myriad Landscape is another one. For this tier is pretty simple because there aren't very many options. There's just the pushed ones that obviously justify the drawback, and then there's stuff like Cathedral of War, which we probably shouldn't touch. For this tier, you probably shouldn't be playing more than 2, which is more than enough for now because of the lack of options. And I guess there's technically a final tier, lands that don't make mana. They either do nothing or the most broken crap. Not really relevant to our discussion today because these should absolutely be taking up spell slots rather than land slots. So now we have our tier list. How do we use it? We work from the bottom up. Yes, you heard that right. Starting from tier 3 because those are the most difficult to include and often mean the strongest payoffs. Let's use a real life example. How about the new commander from Edge of Eternities, Kilo, Apogee Mind? A really interesting and open-ended legendary. I don't want to build another Atraxa deck though, so why don't we try aggro? We can play some of the modular cards and stuff. I don't know, we'll see. And we have solid payoffs like Wave Goodbye, Deming Verdict, Sigarda Summons, all that good stuff. Okay, let's go. 38 lands. First, we're going to need a few basics. Not too many though, as we won't be playing too much ramp. Let's say 5. Who needs 2 mountains, am I right? Now comes color fixing. We need some pretty aggressive fixing in this deck because while we may not always need to cast our commander on turn 3, we do want to bring it out soon to start escalating our board. And before that, we also want to drop things that benefit from this proliferate. So let's go heavy on the mana fixing lands. Let's say 17 of them. Now figuring out the ratios and colors should be in another video by another YouTuber. I don't know how to fix colors, man. I just do a third, a third, a third, even. Done. Now we have room for 16 utility lands. So let's start from tier 3, 2 slots. Looking through the options though, it seems like Hall of the Bandit Lord is the only one that works with our deck. Giving haste without costing us tempo, every use is just excellent. We don't need the ramp from Mirrored Landscape. Also not doing landfall to enable Field of the Dead. And I know it's tempting, but I think we'll refrain from Maze's ending this time. 1 down, 15 to go. Moving on to tier 2, 8 lands. We are 3 color and a bit color intensive as we mentioned earlier. So let's go heavier on group A. Let's say a 5-3 split. Starting with colorless, Urza's Saga works well with Proliferate, and being able to grab a Soul Ring or Esper Sentinel just seems too good to pass up. Nesting Ground's a bit slow, but moving counters onto creatures without them, like our commander, will allow us to boost and grow our board so much faster. Karn's Bastion, another Proliferate at instant speed, will be ridiculous with the Saga creatures that we'll play. And that's all. I'm sure you may come up with a set of different lands, but the key here is we stick to our numbers. Alright, now 5 from the other group, tapped but colored. We can never have too many haste neighbors in an aggro deck. Flamekin Village, let's go. Being able to clone a creature for 3 mana seems excellent, and a lot of our +1 counter creatures scale well in multiples. And we're going deep into the MDFCs here because they're just so good. Legion's Leadership being a dual end on the back is excellent, and the front side is also a decent combat trick. With the way we intend to accumulate counters on the creatures, this can easily send an opponent home in the late game. On a side note, this is also the perfect kind of MDFC. Early game you will nearly always want to play it as a land, and late it's always a spell. Unlike, for example, Malakir Rebirth. It's so good actually, but I'm always tempted to hold on to it in the early game, messing up my rhythm. Undo Inversion is also great because of that. The super high cost is almost an upside, making sure you don't have any stupid thoughts in the early game. Also, Suppression Ray. Who cares if we don't have energy? An Alpha Strike with this in the late game can easily steal some wins for us. Also with Kilo, we have a set of new gems, the Depletion Lens. On paper, these are amazing with Kilo, but I suspect they may be way worse in practice. But if we don't try them here, where else? Alright, now we have 8, and we get to move on to Tier 1. And you may have noticed we only have 4 slots left, so we're just taking the best ones. Arena of Glory, Emeria's Call, Minamo, and Castle Embereth belongs here as well, assuming we have the support of dual lands and fetch land. And this is our full utility land base. Now this may seem a bit counterintuitive, how our quote-unquote highest tier of lands only has 4 entries. But another quick example should be able to illustrate better why Tier 1 lands are Tier 1. Let's take a Selesnya deck, Yuna, Hope of Spira. A Selesnya beatdown deck with enchantment creatures, here in 2 color the need to mana fix is much lower. Let's say between basics and mana fixing lands we are using up just 16 slots compared to Kilo's 22. And now for Yuna we have 22 slots for utility lands. We stick to the formula, 2 from Tier 3, 8 from Tier 2, and now we have 12 more slots. All of these can be used for Tier 1 lands. For Tier 1, we start strong with Boseiju, Castle Garenbrig, Monumental Henge, because Sagas, Emeria's Call, Turn Timber Symbiosis, Igenjo. Yeah, you can see the quality is dropping a bit, but it doesn't matter. That's the point of Tier 1. Play whatever you think feels right. Shifting Woodlands, sure. The Shire, why not? Kishla Village, Castle Ardenville, because I like the art. Yeah, you get the point. Tier 1 cards you can just play, guilt-free, without ever worrying about hurting the groundwork of your deck. So there you have it. This is the rough guideline I use for utility lands, working our way up the tier list. Now, I understand that everything is, of course, much more nuanced, and every attempt at simplifying the game of Commander into charts, tiers, or brackets will inevitably fail. But with what we're doing here, we have our bases covered. And from there, we can attempt to reach upwards and make our customizations. But do remember that lands are responsible not for the ceiling, but for the floor of your deck. Don't mess with it too much or you will be shooting yourself in the foot. This is Jin with Next Level Commander. If you enjoy this kind of video, please like and subscribe. How do you play utility lands? Let me know in the comments. I'll see you soon.